Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in, much appreciated. Also too, for those of y'all that leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. That's the way it works on YouTube. All that stuff helps boost the channel up. The more views that we get, more support that we get, the more videos I'm going to make on a lot of different stuff, especially with reloading and guns and stuff. So thank you to y'all that support the channel. Also too, with the Amazon associates, clicking on the links as well. Anytime that I post a product that I like and put a link to it, when y'all click on it and buy stuff through there, it just kicks back a small commission to the channel. And all that extra support is important, to buy new equipment and, buy new things to review and all that sort of stuff. So thanks to everyone for your support. Really do appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different considerations for case prep in regards to 300 Blackout. And so this is going to be a thing where, two kind of areas to be concerned about. And depending on what we're loading and all that, sometimes it might not even be important. There's a lot of times where I've not even done any case prep at all, other than, resizing the brass and trimming it before I load it, and of course cleaning it. So we're going to go through some of that, and you can kind of decide in terms of what's important to you. All right, folks, so the first thing with 300 Blackout in regards to case prep that we might need to be worried about is our primer pockets. And typically, if we are shooting a 300 Blackout brass that's just standard commercial factory 300 Blackout brass, they're not going to crimp it. However, for a lot of us out there, that when we're shooting 300 Blackout, we're shooting cases that have been converted from 5.56, and if that's the case, oftentimes, especially if it's military surplus, contract overruns, whatever it might be, it's going to be a thing where they're going to put a crimp in the primer pocket. Right here, you can kind of maybe make out like a faint kind of ring there. So most of the time when they crimp, they're actually going to put a crimp ring in there. And the reason for that is to hold that primer in place and not have it kind of come loose, especially when it's being fired in machine guns. So that is kind of the purpose of it. Also, you might, on occasion, I can't think of it too much with 5.56, but also too, sometimes they might stake the primer in place as well. So if you reload this brass, somebody, either the person you bought the brass from or yourself, you're going to need to basically clean out this primer pocket to get rid of that crimp, so you can easily insert another primer. This will be especially important if you're running a progressive press, because you do not want to get those jams on your progressive press with primers half stuck in cases. So you definitely want to ensure that you have nice, clean, straight up primer pockets with no crimps that are going to give you any issues putting the new primer in. Now, you have two options with this. One of which is you can swage it, which basically involves running a steel rod up into that primer pocket that has been perfectly sized for this situation. And what it does is it kind of pushes back to the edges that crimp ring and makes it so that you can easily put in a primer. The other option you have is to ream it out mechanically, where you'll actually remove a little bit of brass to basically clean out that area where the crimp was. So again, you can easily insert a primer. If you do not have these issues, like for instance, if you're using 300 Blackout specific brass, such as this ADI 300 Blackout brass, there's no evidence here at all of any crimping that went on. So this is Australian Defence Industries, and they make this specific 300 Blackout. It's not a converted case. And so there's no evidence here where they have crimped it at all. It's just a straight up case. So if you have that, this might not be as much an issue where you end up having to swage or ream those primer pockets. The next thing that we might have to concern ourselves with is the case mouth itself. Now, you can see here that the case mouth has been trimmed. I trimmed those with the world's finest trimmer. I just put out a video on that. Please check that out if you're interested. And the one thing with the world's finest trimmer, it says that when you insert it in to trim the brass, you turn it back a quarter turn the other way and it'll help deburr it. So whether your brass has been trimmed or maybe it's in spec and it's never been trimmed in its life, these case mounts, it's going to kind of vary in terms of the importance of doing any sort of chamfering or deburring on your own, or possibly expanding. It's going to be kind of up to you. So a couple things that might come into play. Let's take a look, for instance, at some bullets here. Now, whenever I have loaded, like for instance, the 150 grain full metal jacket Hornady bullet, they have kind of a boat tail edge, very similar, for instance, like to these spear bullets that I pulled a number of years ago from some ammunition. You can see that we have kind of a boat tail there at the end of the bullet. So if we do not chamfer, deburr, or expand or anything like that, a lot of times I don't do any case prep to the case mouth at all, because in these situations, this boat tail edge will easily sit down there into the bullet like so, and you can see it pretty much sits there on its own, okay, with no assistance. So whenever it comes time to actually seat that bullet and run it up into the seating die and seat that bullet down into the case, as long as I don't like try to ram it and force it really hard or really fast, usually I can just squeeze it right in there, no problem at all, okay? But the issue that we can run into is this, is that if we have, for instance, like some Nosler Varmageddon bullets, a lot of bullets that we shoot in 300 Blackout, they will have kind of a flat bottom like this one. And maybe on the edge right around here, maybe the manufacturer will just put a slight little chamfer or bevel on it. The Hornady 110 grain VMAX bullets kind of have that. And also these do too, just kind of a little edge, which will help when we go to seat it. But the issue is that essentially these bullets here, like if I just even sit it on the table, try to put the bullet on, like, you know, as long as I don't touch it and I just kind of just seat it right there, it should, won't stay. So I can't get it to stay. So that's the thing is that since we don't have that boat tail edge to sit down into the bullet, it's going to be a little bit harder whenever we actually go to seat the bullet. And this is where we might run into issues, and we really have to watch. You can see how just easily it falls off. So it's a thing where if we can go ahead and put like a chamfer and make sure that our edges are deburred, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to actually go and seat that bullet. Now, there's also too one thing that some folks do that I've seen, that they actually expand the case mounts on 300 Blackout. I have never found the need to do that myself. So this is something, again, it's up to you whether you want to get some sort of die to expand the case mounts. I've never found it important myself. I have found, though, that if I do not chamfer and deburr the case mouth, typically seating flat bottom bullets like this is going to be more complicated and give me more issues if I don't do that. So with all this brass here, just to, because I don't know what I'm doing for my next project, I'm just going to go ahead and chamfer and deburr these case mounts and go ahead and get them all nice and cleaned up with a nice pretty edge, so that whenever I do go to seat bullets, it's just going to make my life a lot easier. All right, so now we actually need to look at how we're going to carry out doing our case prep and with chamfering and deburring, or if we're going to ream our primer pockets, uniform them, clean them out. One of the things that'll be a big help to you is to get some sort of powered machine like this. This is a Lyman Case Prep Xpress. I've used it for a number of years. It's worked excellent, never had one issue with it. Pretty much every reloading manufacturer out there has some variation on this machine. Some of them, they just have like a thing where you actually go kind of straight on with your piece of brass and do it that way. This one is kind of angled totally differently. One of the things I liked about it is that when you do all of your different stuff with your primer or your case mouth, all of the brass shavings just fall there, and then you can take a little brush basically and scoop this into this little bucket, or I'll just take the vacuum and just hit it with the vacuum. It just seemed, I like this way of doing it. It just keeps the brass shavings and all that a lot more contained. And then we also have additional tools here as well. And then also for large primer pockets too. We've got all three tools for those. So that's what I find kind of works for me. If you're just starting in reloading, so just like whenever I started in reloading, one, I didn't have a huge budget to go blowing a lot of stuff. And then two, I wasn't even sure if I'd even like reloading. Basically, all this stuff right here you can find in a hand tool. And like, for instance, I just dug this out of my drawer. This happens to be a Lyman primer pocket cleaner. Probably hardly used it at all, because pretty much by the time I started using a lot of these hand tools, it got to the point with the volume I was doing that it made sense to buy a powered machine. And as you get more and more into reloading, you're going to find that the more you automate or power stuff, especially when you're doing volume, the better it's going to be for you, instead of doing a lot of intensive manual work over a long period of time. But there again, if restrained by budget or you're not loading that much ammunition, hand tools work fine. Okay, so we got our machine turned on right here, so we'll go ahead and we'll do a bit of chamfering and deburring here. So pretty much what I do, just set it, the case mouth straight down on there, and I'll just let it do its thing until I feel the resistance go away. You don't need to force it or anything, just hold it down on there. And then just give it a nice little deburr there. Okay, and then if you need to remount the primer pocket, like I set it right on top of there, I don't feel any resistance. And there again, the reason being is I have reamed all these or went ahead and swaged all the primer pockets before. And actually this one is a straight up 300 Blackout piece of brass anyways. And then a little bit of resistance there with the primer pocket uniformer. And there was definitely some sludge there, the primer pocket residue that kind of came out. So the main thing for me is just focusing on chamfering and deburring. But if you don't want to swage and you want to ream, then it's the thing where you can use this and this machine to do it. You'll feel a bit of resistance, and I've used it and I've done it. It works fine. Personally, myself, I prefer to swage it. That's my preference. But again, it's up to you. At the end of the day, either method is going to get you to where you need to go. And just do a little bit of cleaning, and a little bit of primer pocket uniforming. I mean, while we're here, might as well do it. So, definitely a little bit of resistance there. And let's have kind of a look at one of the case mounts here. So, you can kind of maybe see, there we go, that's better. The light kind of on that edge. So instead of just being cut like straight across now, it has that nice beveled edge on the inside. And then also too, the outer part of the case mouth as well has been all cleaned up, okay? So whenever we go to actually seat that bullet with like this nozzle of Armageddon here, it fits in there a little bit nicer, okay? It's still not a thing like look at that. If you remember from before, whenever we went to kind of put the bullet there on top, even just sitting there, it was hard to get it to stay in place. But now that we have that beveled edge there on the inside of the brass, you can see the difference there. You know, the bullet will actually sit there. So now whenever we go to seat it, it's going to be a thing of, as long as, again, we don't, you know, go crazy slamming it down in there, it should slide nicely into the case and without any issues at all. So definitely a big help to do the chamfer and Deburr. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a couple more here. Let's get that primer pocket. These primer pockets should be pretty good, so I'm not overly concerned about it. But let's just go ahead and chamfer and Deburr a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. And then the other thing I'm going to do, because I trimmed these and I did not clean them, they've got, you know, brass shavings and stuff like that on them, so it's going to be a thing of where I'm going to give them a nice clean before we actually go to do primers and seat our bullet and all that. So. And then once these get a little bit too messy, you can either use your brush right here, just use some sort of brush, keep them all nice and clean, and I'll just hit it with the vacuum too and vacuum it all up. But again, let's have a look at that edge. So there again, kind of that nice beveled edge in the inside, and that's pretty much what we're looking for right there, is that nice beveled edge. All right, so we'll do one or two more here, and then let's go ahead and wrap it up. So again, I just hold it there until I kind of feel the resistance go away. And then just one more. All right. All right, folks, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. So at the end of the day, if we can go ahead and get these case mounts all nice and cleaned up, it's going to help us for our next project, whatever that might be. And, you know, in the past, I have to say, there have been some projects where I know I'm just making like plinker ammunition and I'm using like a boat tail bullet, and I don't get as concerned about chamfering and deburring and getting those case mounts all perfect. And it works fine. But definitely with those flat base bullets, it's a big help if you do that, I find, to get that case mouth all nice and cleaned up. And then in regards to your primer pockets, you got those two options. You can ream it or you can swage it. If you're just using straight up 300 Blackout brass, like this one, this right here is a lake, looks like a Lake City. So, you know, it's been crimped. I see that little crimpering right in there. So if you have crimps to deal with, swaging it or reaming it, both of which will get you there in terms of what you need. Personally, I prefer swaging, but I have used this before just fine. And you just ream out a little bit of brass to get rid of that crimpering and you're good to go. So we should be able to knock out this bucket pretty fast and get this all done, get these washed. And get them ready for priming and then for our next 300 Blackout project. So thanks to everyone for tuning in again. I appreciate it. Any questions or comments, leave them below. If there's anything I left out or forgot, feel free to chime in. We have a lot more videos coming down the pike, so stay tuned. Got a lot of exciting projects coming up, so I'm looking forward to that. I think you guys will enjoy it too. We'll see you next time.